Welcome back, degenerates. I got myself another Seiko. I think I've come to terms that I'm a hapless Seiko fanboy. I don't even resist the temptation anymore. Anyways, this is the JDM SBEJ005 Alpinist GMT. For those of you new to watches, or buying things in general, JDM stands for Japanese Domestic Market, meaning this watch is not available for sale anywhere outside of Japan. That doesn't mean you can't buy JDM products, you just won't be able to buy them through the typical white market process. I was able to get mine easily enough. One Google search is what it took to find several dealers that had it available for sale. This model seems to hover around the $1,000 price range, but with me being the cheap bastard that I am, I negotiated the price down to $800. Never pay the asking price if you don't have to. You'll never know if you can get it for cheaper unless you ask, and the worst thing the seller can say is no. For $1,000, I don't think this watch is a good value, but of course value is so subjective that it's almost pointless to talk about. I think a better way to approach this is to say, if you can comfortably afford it, then you're gonna enjoy this watch. I think of the entire Alpinist lineup, the GMT versions are the best, and of the GMT versions, this green variation is the best. I've enjoyed the Alpinist from afar for years, and the biggest roadblock that prevented me from buying one was because I thought it was too shiny. I've never been a fan of mirror polished finishes, and even less so on watches that are advertised as rugged adventure watches. I mean, it's called the Alpinist for Christ's sake. It shouldn't be polished. So when the GMT versions came out, I immediately knew I had to have one. If you follow my channel, you know that I ended up getting the limited edition SBEJ005, which I still have and enjoy. But at the end of the day, an Alpinist has to have a green dial. The quintessential design traits that make an Alpinist, outside of the pointless compass bezel, is an irresistibly beautiful sunburst green dial and gold indices. To me, there is no exception to this. So as I was saying, I think the green GMT version of the Alpinist is the one to get. Of course I don't speak for everyone, but for me the proof is in the experience, and all I can say is that this watch is unable to look bad. It's physically incapable of not putting a smile on my face. Whichever angle I see it at, in any lighting condition and at any time of day, it looks good. Sunburst dials have this way of making a watch visually sing that's hard to capture in a static image, and it's not until you see it dance with the light in person that you can truly appreciate what makes it special. And while that feature is definitely more of a luxury design element, the surrounding brushed steel on the bezel keeps the watch grounded in a more professional way. The end result is a watch that satisfies both the utilitarian problem solver and romantic watch nerd that lives in all of us. The case sides have a mirror polish, but it's broken up enough through various layers like the beveled edges, the rounded portion, and accompanying brushed lugs to where it doesn't overwhelm the case in shininess. Those layers also help mask a lot of the case height, which on paper this watch doesn't seem that thick, but in person it's a little bit chunkier than your average field watch, and the case design carries it very well. Let's take a look at the rest of the dimensions, which I think are great. The 39mm diameter and 46mm lug-to-lug work well, and personally it wears well on my 8-inch wrist. The only criticism I'd have here is the case thickness, but that's me being overly nitpicky and it's not actually an issue whatsoever. I would like to see a 12mm thick GMT from Seiko eventually, but I'll still be happy with this if that never happens. The GMT functionality is brought to you by Seiko's 6R54 movement. I'm not gonna lie to you, all of these mid-tier to lower end Seiko movements are the same to me. Don't get your panties all up in a bunch, I'm not trying to hurt anyone's feelings by saying mid-tier or lower end. They're just words I'm using to describe where they fall compared to the entire range of movements they offer. Whether it's a 6R or 4R movement, really the most noticeable difference is going to be about $500 and a feeling like you just got used. In all seriousness, the differences will be a decorated movement, and in this case, 72 hours of power reserve, which you'll never forget because the dial will always remind you that it can keep going for 3 days. I don't know why they thought that was a better alternative than just the classic Alpinist text, but there's a lot of things I don't know, so that's fine I guess. The GMT and date complications are what turn this watch into a fun collector's piece, into a usable tool out in the professional world. While it's easy to say that anything your watch provides can also be provided by a phone, the small convenience of being able to simply look at your wrist for information is big. For me personally, I'm constantly traveling, I'm constantly in different time zones, I'm also underwater away from any cell reception, and you'd be surprised at how useful it is to have a watch that immediately tells me whether it's AM or PM and what the date is. There's something to be said about a simple three-handed watch, but I found in real life, the ideal tool watch is a GMT with a date complication. That's just what I found to be the most useful. Of course, that doesn't mean I need it all the time. I'm talking specifically when I'm at work doing work things. It doesn't get any better than having such a useful watch that looks this good. It's like a hot blonde that also happens to be a farmhand.
As you wish.
I mentioned earlier that I'm often underwater away from cell reception. Well, that also means that I'm often in the dark, and good lume is incredibly important to me. Seiko lume is a workhorse lume. It stays glowing with minimal charge time and really only requires moderate artificial lighting to do so. I love waking up in the pitch black middle of the night in the Atlantic Ocean and having my reliable Seiko brightly remind me of how much sleep I didn't get. For the rest of the hardware, the Alpinist comes with the standard bells and whistles of a generally accepted good watch, such as a sapphire crystal, a screw-down crown, and a screw-down caseback. No, the compass bezel crown does not screw down, but it surprisingly remains in the same spot over time. I usually keep my bezel with north at 12 o'clock, and it more or less stays there. Suffice it to say that while the bezel crown doesn't screw in, it's secure enough to reassure me that the seals are good. Speaking of seals, the watch is rated to 200 meters of water resistance, which is good enough for me as I dive into a family-sized bag of potato chips. This Alpinist comes with a brown leather strap, and despite my distaste for leather straps, I like the fact that they included a deploying clasp with it. I really don't like leather straps, because unless you're a stripper, leather and sweat should never be together. But if I had to wear a leather strap, I'd do so with a deploying clasp. It's better for the strap, it's easier to wear for me, and it adds an overall classier presentation. Fortunately, the fan base for the Alpinist is so vast that there's a significant amount of aftermarket support for it, namely with bracelets. I've got mine on a Strapcode Angus Jubilee, and it looks exceptionally juicy this way. And that's about it. I'm pretty sure I've covered everything I can about the Alpinist GMT, and I'm pretty sure you're all sick and tired of me fangirling over it. What can I say? I'm a sucker for Seikos, and if you made it this far, you probably are too. Buy it, don't buy it, I'll still be happy with mine. But that's all for now. Stay classy. I sure as hell won't.